In June of this year, the Air National Guard's 142nd Wing in Portland, Oregon, received America's first operational F-15EX Eagle II, a revamped iteration of the legendary air superiority fighter intended to replace the nation's aging fleets of F-15C and D fighters. These non-stealthy but highly capable aircraft will be tasked with assuming the homeland defense role. But when we're talking about an updated iteration of the most prolific fighter of the latter half of the 20th century, both Boeing and the Air Force are already looking at the possibility of expanding the Eagle II's responsibilities for decidedly more offensive operations. But in the early days of a high-end fight, non-stealth aircraft like the Eagle II would be flying with a very big target on their wing roots. And that's why these plans are designed around using the F-15EX's massive payload capabilities, its advanced onboard avionics, and its overall resiliency to support and enable other offensive operations until air defenses can be beaten back enough for the Eagle II to go on the hunt. So let's talk about some of the most advanced and novel uses for what I already consider to be the most capable 4th generation fighter on the planet, ranging from serving as a long-range missile truck to a high-performance tactical tanker. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. Just before dawn on Tuesday morning, a massive explosion ripped through Toropets, Russia, some 300 miles north of the Ukrainian border. This explosion was so big it was registered on earthquake monitors throughout the region. NASA satellites picked up an infrared heat spike emanating from a 14 square kilometer radius around the center of this fireball. And independent assessments suggest it was the explosive equivalent of between 200 and 240 tons of high explosives. This explosion, it now appears, was caused by a Ukrainian drone strike against a Russian ammunition and missile depot. And this event presents an excellent opportunity to compare the way these stories are covered depending on a media outlet's political affiliations. And that's why I'm such a big fan of ground news. Now, ground news is a news aggregator that collects articles published by outlets all around the world and places them all in a single easy-to-read feed, making it easier than ever to compare headlining practices between different outlets. Ground news will even tell you the political leanings of an outlet, its factuality rating, who owns them, and whether or not they are state-sponsored. Here on Ground News, I can see that 158 news outlets have covered this story, including 24 left-leaning, 27 right-leaning, and 17 centrist outlets. And I can easily see how left-leaning outlets use intentionally descriptive terms like earthquake-sized blast to describe this event, whereas right-leaning outlets were more reserved in their language choices, with headlines like Ukrainian drone strike large military depot in Russian town. With the presidential election coming up, I like Ground News' 2024 US election page, which covers top stories from around the world about presidential campaigns and even includes blind spots or stories that are getting a lot of coverage in one political sphere and not in the other. I use Ground News every day, not just for my research, but for my general news consumption. And if you want to too, I can get you a great deal. Just go to ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use every day in my research. Again, that's ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's to get 40% off their Vantage plan to help you stay on top of things. With the development of America's next air superiority fighter, known as the Next Generation Air Dominance Fighter, now on hold, the Air Force is actively developing a myriad of strategies aimed at ensuring the US maintains its dominant edge in the sky, even if its new high-end fighters take years to manifest. New investments into the F-22 Raptor fleet, made up of just 150 or so combat-coded jets, aim to ensure they remain the most dominant air superiority fighters on the planet throughout the 2030s, and the forthcoming Block 4 F-35 promises to be perhaps the most broadly capable jet on the planet by the time it enters service. But war games played out both within the Defense Department and by a variety of external independent think tanks all point toward the reality that these fighter fleets would not be enough to overwhelm Chinese defenses all on their own in the event of open war over the Pacific. It has become clear that in order to deter such a conflict, or barring that, to win it, the US will need a large volume of airframes, delivering an even larger volume of ordnance into the fight. And while collaborative combat aircraft, or AI-enabled drones, will play a big role in the strategy to overcome this challenge, America's fourth-generation fighters will need to do their part as well. And while America's new F-15EX lacks the stealth necessary to be considered survivable as the tip of the spear in highly contested airspace, it's actually extremely well suited for a wide variety of other jobs in the early days of such a fight. Some of these duties could become primary responsibilities for Eagle II pilots, while others could be considered tertiary or supplementary responsibilities that F-15EXs could fly to support very specific missions, or to enable offensive operations in the early days of a fight, while F-35s conduct the suppression and destruction of enemy air defense operations, and F-22s go after China's most advanced J-20s and J-31s. But before I dive into these roles and responsibilities, I want to address one common concern I hear about the F-15EX whenever I discuss it in my work, and that's the idea that non-stealth fighters serve no role in modern warfare, because that just isn't the case at all. The truth is, fourth generation or non-stealth fighters represent the majority of America's fighter fleets, and these aircraft were designed to fight in contested airspace. They just aren't considered as survivable as stealth jets like the F-22 and F-35. So those stealth aircraft will be tasked with the highest risk operations. But as the airspace becomes a bit more permissible, platforms like the F-15EX will play a vital role in combat operations. But again, in those early days of the fight, before adversary air defenses and combat air patrols can be degraded to the point where fourth-generation fighters can operate pretty freely, aircraft like the Eagle II could still be plenty busy, thanks to operations like these. Now, I'm going to run through this list of potential Eagle II jobs in order of general familiarity, meaning I'm going to start with potential roles that you're likely already familiar with, and as we go along, we'll go to increasingly novel and original ideas. So the first we have to discuss is pretty obvious: using the F-15EX as a missile truck. Now, because stealth fighters have to carry their weapons internally to maintain their low observable profile, they're significantly limited not just in the number, but in the size of the weapons they can bring with them into a fight. As such, the Air Force has already expressed a great deal of interest in using the F-15EX as an oversized missile truck, relaying target data collected by forward-advancing stealth fighters back to the Eagle II for engagement from outside the reach of enemy air defenses. Now, this could be particularly valuable for larger air-launched hypersonic weapons, like the Air Force's AGM-183A Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon, or ARROW. This weapon, which saw troubled testing but may yet find its way into service, offers an immense range of more than 1,000 miles and the ability to fly and maneuver at speeds in excess of Mach 7. But at roughly 22 feet long and around 6,600 pounds, these massive missiles would never fit inside the internal weapons bay of an American stealth fighter. To date, Aero test launches have been conducted from B-52 bombers, but plans are already in place to integrate the system into F-15E Strike Eagles if and when it does enter service. But the F-15EX's ability to carry oversized loads could prove highly useful in the air superiority mission as well. In recent months, we've gotten a good look at the US Navy's new AIM-174B, an air-launched variant of the ship-launched SM-6 interceptor that has the potential to engage airborne targets at ranges potentially in excess of 300 miles. Now, that Navy-specific weapon was designed specifically with the Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air Architecture in mind, which is effectively a network of battlefield assets that will allow Super Hornets to get target information from forward-advancing stealth fighters or from powerful ship-based radar arrays and engage them with that AIM-174 even when the Super Hornet itself can't see the target on its own radar scope. The F-15EX, with its superior payload capacity, could excel in a similar role for the US Air Force, and in fact, there's been mention of the aircraft doing exactly that, dating all the way back to budget documents in 2022 that referenced Eagle IIs carrying an as-yet undisclosed, very long-range air-to-air missile. That weapon could potentially be the Navy's AIM-174, modified for Air Force duty, which was certainly in development and testing well before being formally acknowledged by the Navy earlier this year. Or, more likely, it could be one of several other missile programs in development under names like the Long Range Engagement Weapon, or LREW. The F-15EX's ability to carry payloads of up to 29,500 pounds, distributed across between 12 and 23 hardpoints depending on the types of weapon, would allow these aircraft to carry a large volume of long-range air-to-air missiles like the forthcoming AIM-260, or standoff air-to-surface munitions like the AGM-158 JASSM family of cruise missiles, or the aforementioned Arrow hypersonic missile, all of which would allow the Eagle II to engage adversary forces from well outside the reach of their own air defenses using target data relayed by other more survivable platforms. And that actually dovetails very nicely into the next potential use case for the F-15EX in the early days of such a fight, and that is serving as a drone coordinator. You see, despite being a two-seat aircraft, the F-15EX is designed to fly and fight with full functionality with just a single pilot on board, even in complex multi-role operations. Now, this was done in no small part to ensure Eagle IIs can seamlessly replace single-seat F-15Cs in that homeland defense role, and a great deal of operational testing has been done with only a single crew member on board for that very reason. But that seemingly unnecessary backseat provides several significant advantages, ranging from flying with a traditional weapons systems officer or WSO on board, as one might in an F-15E Strike Eagle, to more forward-leaning concepts like that of a drone coordinator for the Air Force's forthcoming Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCAs. Now, as we discussed just last week, earlier this year, the US Air Force awarded contracts to continue development on the first increments of these air-to-air focused UCAVs, or Unmanned Combat Aerial Vehicles. Those contracts were awarded to Anduril and General Atomics, but there are several other firms in the running for subsequent tranches of drones in the not-too-distant future. All told, Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall has claimed the branch intends to purchase at least 1,000 of these low observable drones, with the original goal of pairing 2 each to 300 new Block 4 F-35s and 200 new next-generation air dominance fighters once they make their way towards service. But now, with the NGAD fighter itself on ice, the Air Force has nonetheless reaffirmed its commitment to fielding these promising new drones, which will be piloted by artificial intelligence being matured and tested through efforts like Skyborg and Project Venom, both of which we have videos on if you'd like to learn more. This idea was brought to life, at least in a way, in a recent 3D render released by Collins Aerospace that depicted F-A-18 Super Hornets, F-35s, and what appear to be twin-seat F-15E Strike Eagles, though they may have been intended to represent Eagle IIs based on their loadouts, commanding entire formations of CCA-type drones through tablets and cockpit displays. Now, this could prove to be a very potent role for the F-15EX in a future fight, as a constellation of CCA-type drones could extend the aircraft's sensor reach deep into contested airspace without the fighter itself entering the engagement envelope for many enemy air defense systems. These forward-advancing drones could engage aircraft and ground targets, carry electronic warfare payloads, and more, all at the whim of the weapons systems officer, or maybe drone systems officer, riding in the back seat of an Eagle II a few dozen miles back. Back in May of 2019, Air Force Acquisitions Chief Will Roper disclosed to Defense News that the idea of pairing Block 4 F-35s and new F-15EXs with CCA drones was already the subject of discussions between the branch, the respective firms, and the Air Force Research Lab developing their control systems. Now, since then, we have learned that the ability to pair with CCA drones is indeed expected to manifest in the Block 4 F-35, but formal acknowledgement of the Eagle II getting the same capability has not yet been forthcoming, though Will Roper certainly seemed to think it was a good idea. I'll quote him now. The F-15EX is a uniquely suited platform for such tech insertions, as it has the available computing capacity and space to continue offering new capabilities to the warfighter. And he was not kidding. So let's talk about some of the more original or under-discussed potential use cases for the F-15EX, starting with turning the Eagle II into what I like to call the Growling Eagle. You see, with Boeing's F-A-18 Super Hornet production line set to sunset in 2027, it also means production will halt on its electronic warfare sibling, the EA-18G Growler. Now, this hasn't been lost on Boeing, who announced in July of 2024 that they're exploring the possibility of integrating the Growler's new next-generation jammer pods into the Eagle II to convert the broadly capable fighter into an electronic attack platform capable of not just penetrating contested airspace, but increasing the survivability of other fourth and even fifth generation fighters along the way. In terms of power and payload capacity, the Eagle II certainly has the chops for the job. The U.S. Navy's EA-18G Growler has 9 total hardpoints for weapons, fuel tanks, and jamming equipment, with the ability to fly with as much as 17,750 pounds of weapons and gear slung beneath it, which is certainly respectable for a carrier-based aircraft. The Eagle II, on the other hand, operates strictly from runways, which allows it to carry significantly more weight. In fact, as I mentioned, it can fly with a mind-boggling 29,500 pounds of ordnance and other gear carried on board. Now, details are sparse regarding Boeing's potential plans for this Growling Eagle concept, but it stands to reason that there would need to be at least some modifications made to the aircraft to equip it with the variety of sensors and electronic warfare receivers already stuffed inside the Growler's fuselage, in place of things like the M61 Vulcan rotary cannon found in the Super Hornet. It's also likely, of course, that this Growling Eagle would carry the next generation jammer pods, the first of which entered service on the Growler earlier this year. Now, these new pods, delineated into low-band, mid-band, and high-band jammers, are capable of wreaking havoc on enemy air defenses and other electronic systems, and rendering enemy airspace far more survivable for stealth and non-stealth fighters alike. Now, before I move on, let me address one thing I know will pop up in the comments, and that's the idea that these Growling Eagles could operate from carriers, because the answer to that is almost certainly no. While the Pentagon did once explore the idea of fielding a carrier-capable variant of the F-15, known to many as the F-15N or Sea Eagle, that idea has long since died, and the Growling Eagle would be entirely an Air Force asset, operating in a similar capacity to the EF-111A Raven electronic warfare aircraft the U.S. Air Force operated until 1998. And as electronic warfare grows increasingly important in modern warfare, the Growling Eagle may just have a solid shot at flying its way into service. And finally, let's talk about what could be one of the most novel use cases for the Eagle 2, and that is as a high-performance tactical refueling tanker. Now that might sound nuts, and maybe it is, but I also really like the idea. Now, the US already maintains the world's largest fleets of aerial refueling platforms, enabling air operations all around the globe, but tanker aircraft are extremely vulnerable assets, especially in a high-end fight, and as such, the US Air Force and Navy alike have been pursuing a number of ways to distribute tanker duties across a wider variety of often more survivable platforms in recent years. Now, in the long term, this issue will be addressed by the Next Generation Aerial Refueling System, or NGAS program, which aims to field, there's really no other way to put it, stealthy refueling tankers. But in the meantime, the US Air Force needs to seriously consider the survivability of refueling tankers like the workhorse KC-135 and the new KC-46 in a conflict with a nation like China. And it was seemingly with this very concern in mind that the innovation-focused arm of the Air Force Research Lab, known as AFWERX, recently awarded 2 developmental contracts to field buddy tanker pods for the F-15 family of aircraft that would allow platforms like the Eagle 2 to serve as high-performance refuelers closer to contested airspace than a tanker might venture to fly. Now, this isn't an entirely new concept, of course. The US Navy has used tactical aircraft like the F-A-18 Hornet for refueling duties for years, and more recently began testing its new MQ-25 Stingray refueling drone that operates in a similar manner. Though while the Navy and Marine Corps prefer the probe and drogue refueling method and Air Force tankers use the boom method, it seems as though these buddy tanker refueling systems, known as Small Hybrid Aerial Refueling Kits, or SHARKs, may be a bit more broadly capable. These new Shark refueling systems are said to use a new controllable end effector dubbed Vampire that will enable them to refuel any NATO aircraft regardless of the system they traditionally use. And as luck would have it, I actually know someone directly involved in this effort. In fact, the founder of Tactifuel himself, but not because I had any idea he was involved in this crazy business. He just also happens to be one of the best aviation photographers on the planet. His name is Andrew Kelly, and I highly recommend you follow him on every social media platform that he frequents. But if you want to learn more about this buddy tanker concept and how it could be employed, let me know, because I would love to pick his brain about it. Now, serving as a buddy refueler could really be a place where the Eagle 2's speed, payload capacity, and general survivability could really make it a boon for American air power even without trading blows in contested airspace. F-15EXs equipped with buddy tanker pods could even serve as something as a bridge between vulnerable tanker aircraft operating further away from the fight and stealth fighters like the F-35 and F-22 conducting combat operations deep inside contested airspace. When the stealth fighters need a top-up, they could meet Eagle 2s for rapid refueling before heading back into the fight, while the F-15EX then turns and heads away from the fray to meet up with a tanker and refill its stores for the next stealth fighter in need of a pit stop. Now, again, aside from the Growling Eagle concept, which may indeed require a specialized iteration of the F-15 to be built, we're really not talking about new primary roles for the Eagle 2 so much as new added options or responsibilities F-15EXs could fly with into the fight. And as we look toward deterring 21st century conflicts using what remains a broadly Cold War-era defense apparatus, this is how we need to be looking at all of America's military platforms in the air, on land, and at sea. In a large-scale fight, it straight up doesn't matter what any of these platforms were built to do. What matters is what they're capable of, and how we can best leverage these systems and those capabilities to maximum effect on the battlefield. The hard truth of the matter is, global conflict is an existential threat. It is, by definition, life or death business. And that means using the systems you have at hand in any way you have to deliver victory. And if that means using the baddest 4th generation fighter on the planet to deliver gas to the most advanced stealth fighters in the world, well, so be it. Because after those first few days of stealth-centric combat operations, the Eagle II will be let off its leash. And at that point, there is a solid chance that adversary fighters and even ground targets will learn just how embarrassing it is to get utterly obliterated by an aircraft that was topping off F-22s a week ago. And with that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.